Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the CyberGizmo, I'm going to be looking at the latest Alpine Linux release right after this. So Alpine back, I think in January the 14th, released 3.13.0, and it has a number of enhancements in it, but mostly mostly it's updates. So let's talk about what Alpine is. I'm going to refresh what I did 2 years ago and kind of go over some of the features of Alpine again for those of you that aren't very familiar with it. So the first thing is Alpine is designed for power users that want simplicity and resource efficiency. It is a very lightweight distribution, but yet it is as full-featured as it can be and still trying to keep it tight and loose. So one of the big things is that it uses busybox, and busybox contains a lot of the Linux commands contained within one application. So you don't have all the overhead of all the various pieces of a Linux operating system having applications for each individual command. So it combines them all into one. The other thing is it does not use libc. The creators of Alpine just figured that libc is a train wreck, and it pretty much is. It is a big spaghetti mess of code, and they have replaced it with musl. Now that does limit. I mean, that has its limitations, right? So it's not a perfect world. If you eliminate libc, then you eliminate some of the compatibility that some of the applications have. So I mean, you're trading efficiency and speed for some compatibility options. Docker, as far as I know, still uses Alpine as its default image for containers. So it takes as little as 8 megabytes in a container and around 130 megabytes of disk when you install it. The binaries are compiled in position-independent executables, which makes it very hard for a hacker to, if they've memorized the location of certain applications, and where they go into memory because of the order in which they launch, it makes it very difficult for them to find the memory location of a specific application, it's just a security feature. Package management is about 2 times faster than most, and that is using APK. There is a number of options that you can pick when you download. There is standard, which has just enough to get you started. It supports x86 and 64, also x86 32, PowerPC 64, even 390, S390 IBM mainframes. So yeah, you can install this even on the smallest machines all the way up to the largest. The extended includes most commonly used packages. Those are included. It is also suitable for routers and servers. It runs from RAM for the most part, and so there isn't any load on your disk, but there is load on your memory. It supports x86 64 and x86 32. There's also NetBoot, which is very similar to standard, except instead of having the ISO loaded, it goes through the internet to pick up the repositories directly. Mini root file system is used in containers and minimal, if you really want very minimal chroot environments. It supports x86 64, x86, ARM HF. I'm not sure about ARM HF anymore. I will check when we're on the website, but that is an older architecture. Most have gone to ARCH 64 and ARM version 7. That way you pick up most of the SoCs that are out there, as well as, like I showed the other day, the Apple M1 is able to run AARch 64. Also, again, PowerPC and S390. So in this case, you're going all the way from Raspberry Pi sized machines all the way up to mainframes. There's also a virtual installation, which allows you to create a virtual machine already. It has a template already set up for a number of virtual machines, and that includes things like Zen and VMware and so forth. So There's also, well, I should say Zen is actually in its own. They have their own support for their own hypervisor, and that includes packages for targeted Zen use. And that supports x86 64 only. Then there's the Raspberry Pi, which uses the Raspberry Pi kernel, and there are two installations for that. One is the one for Raspberry Pi 1 through 3, which is the ARM version 7, and then there's the ARM Arch 64, which will of course be the Raspberry Pi 4. There's also generic ARM, and that has a default ARM kernel and includes the U-boot bootloader. That is probably the most common way to launch ARM-based machines, at least in some of the SOCs. Not all of them have gone to U-boot bootloader yet. Odroid has. They've been on it for a number of years, and I think Pine does too. Pine also uses U-boot. So they are trying to get to a standard method of booting into the kernel. And that supports, of course, the Arch 64 and ARM version 7. So you have both 32-bit and 64-bit ARM support there. There is a number of modes that you can install. There's the diskless mode, which the OS runs from read-only memory. Changes to the OS will be lost. So anytime that you make any changes to the operating system, install packages, change configuration, the next time you reboot, it's gone. There is a utility called the LBU, which allows you to save changes between reboots. So if you do want to save the modifications for the next boot, you just run that utility and it will create a new RAM image that gets installed with the changes that you just made. There's also a data mode, which the OS runs from read-only memory, and it creates a writable partition. It's usually on a hard drive, but you can put it anywhere. You can use any device that you want for that. You can use a USB stick or whatever. But /var is the location of the writable partition. This is similar to basically having a protected environment for Linux. So if you've seen my videos on Clear Linux, or if you've seen my videos on Fedora, you know that they're moving toward a protected environment for the kernel to prevent anything from being modified unless it is authorized. So by default, it's read-only, and then only your certain particular portions of your drives are writable. So in this case, that's what we're talking about in data mode, is a protected execution of the operating system, it's immutable. And then the /var allows you to create your home directories and any other directories you need write capability for. Sys mode runs the OS from the hard disk, so it's a traditional OS install. If you want to use a USB stick, after you boot the image, you have an extra step, and that is you just run the setup bootable and against the device that you mounted as a USB stick, and then you'll be set to be able to install Alpine on it as sys or whatever mode you want to use. So you do that before you run setup Alpine. That's the only difference. Some of the things that you need to do after you install it is set up networking. Now you can set up your networking in line with the setup Alpine if you wish. The default is DHCP, but you can do a manual there as well. It is a traditional networking environment for Linux, so if you're familiar with the /etc/network/interface, then that's the mechanism it uses to do that. If you want to install Docker, you'll have to install a community repository to do that, and there's instructions on their wiki that you can follow along. Same thing with setupxorg. If you want to install a GUI on this, a desktop environment, they support XFCE and LXDE by default, and then there's some community editions for Mate, Awesome. I think there's a couple of others. Maybe OpenBox is one of them as well. But yeah, OpenBox is one of them, as I have listed there. So yeah, those are all community. That OpenBox, excuse me, is an official Alpine image. and the other two, Mate and Awesome, are community. So you'll need the community repositories if you want to install those. And then, as I mentioned before, APK is for package management, and we'll take a look at that. If you want man pages, you'll need to install mandocs, and then there is a man-pages package you'll need to install. It isn't 100% complete, but it has most of the commands documented in traditional man pages if you wish that. Otherwise, by default, it does not install man pages. So if you're looking for those, you can install those if you wish. So I'm going to get my machine ready here, and I'll be right back. Okay, so let's go ahead and sign in and go into the VM environment, which is Proxmox for me. So I'm going to do what I usually do. I'm going to create a new VM, and we'll call this Alpine. I'll need to pick where my repo is for the ISO file. I'm just leaving the rest of it default, and don't need anything there. Well, except for I don't really want to install it on Gluster. Now I could get by with one CPU, and this is way overkill. So I'm just going to give it one CPU, and then actually for this, I'm going to give it 1 gig of memory. It doesn't need a lot. Oh, one other thing. I just do that because it's a little faster. So we'll just wait for it to build out here. There it is. And we'll start it up. Well, come on. There you go. And I'll launch the console. All right, let's see. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to turn on local scaling. I hope that's big enough for you to read. So at this point, I would just do and this is the keyboard, the layout, my default host name, the Ethernet driver, and it already knows which ones are there. And then here, if you wanted to set up DHCP or none, you can do that. Let's see, network configuration. No, don't need anything else. That'll be enough for what I need today. Give your root environment a password. UTC is fine. That I don't need. My mirror I already know is number 1 is the fastest for me, but you may want to run an F there for it to go through and figure out which one is fastest. It'll take a few minutes to run through them all, but then it'll tell you which one is the quickest for your area. OpenSSH is fine, and then I want to install on the hard drive, and I would like sys for this one. And then it asks me to make sure that I want to overwrite the virtual drive, which I do, since there's nothing on it. And as soon as it lays down the boot, we should be done. And we're ready to reboot. That's all there is to it. No big complicated thing. I think what I'm going to do is for the next series of commands that I'm going to give this, what I want to do is be able to page back. So I'm going to go ahead and create a user to do this, and I'm going to use the add user command for that. And then I'm going to exit out of here, and let me see, bring up this, and it should have told me what IP address when it launched. Yeah, it's right there, 119. And we're in, so I'm going to go ahead, and there isn't a sudo. You'll have to install that if you want it, but you can elevate your privileges to root using su. So I'm going to do the apk update and apk upgrade, and that's it. All I have to do is install it's add, and then I want to do htop and get, and then I'll do a reboot. So I pick up the latest patches. It should come back to the same IP address. Yep, it did. Not quite ready to talk to me yet. So first thing we should do before we install a whole bunch of stuff is take a look at the amount of memory that's being required. 27.9 meg. This will vary depending upon how many applications you bring up, and of course how much you do on the system. So you can expect this to be anywhere from 25 meg up to maybe 30 on the server version. And of course that will grow if you decide to put Werq out here as well. But I'm not going to do that today. I am going to show you how to get the man pages out here. So we'll do a man page add, and I mean man doc and man pages. I think. No, well, might help if I elevate my permissions. I think it's man pages. There we go. So now I should be able to get my man pages up and running. So this does use busybox. So and a couple of things I've kind of commented on in the past about Alpine is that its structure is very reminiscent of Unix and the early versions of Linux. A lot of the Linux distros today have decided to do links from the /bin and /sbin to user bin and to user sbin. That's not really a good idea. The reason why the original, I've said this before, I'll say it again, the reason why the Unix creators created /bin and /sbin was that those were intended to contain utilities to be able to recover a system in the event that your user drive failed. They always recommended that you install the system drive on one disk and the user drive on another disk, and that was for performance reasons. So, and since the user drive would be more heavily written, also, if you had a multi-user system, then it would be more heavily written. Then the chances for a drive failure would be more likely to occur in the user space. So they needed a way to be able to boot the system up and be able to recover the data in the event of a failure. And so that's why the bin and sbins were created. If you look at what's actually in them, you have some like tar to be able to restore a backup. You might have ping, make directory. All these things are to make sure that you can get back to a running system. And the same thing with sbin. Sbin has your ability to, turn your swap files off, look at your system control, and look at the config, and also watchdog. So yeah, there's quite a bit in here. There's also all your makefile utilities are in here. So that was the division, and that was primarily the reason why they did it this way. Now, as you'll notice here, there's linkages now to a lot of these commands in blue are actually part of busybox, but there are a few that are still out here that are actual applications. So let's take a look in enough preaching. Let's go see how much space we actually are using here. About 963 meg in total. So yeah, it's certainly lighter weight than most distros, huh? Because most of them, especially with a desktop environment, are around 6 gig to 9 gig today. So yeah, it's quite a bit smaller. And let's see. All right, 510.7. This is that is the LTS, long-term support kernel now. So that's very good. And I don't know. You'll notice that Etsy is very slim. So, I mean, this is a little bit like Arch. I've said that before in the regards of they don't pollute the directories with a whole bunch of junk. So your configurations are, for the most part, minimal, and then you would set up what you want as you're installing systems. So Alpine is not for beginners. It is definitely a release for people that understand Linux a little bit, have maybe had a year under their belt playing around with other Linux distributions before coming to Alpine. At least that's what I would recommend. But you know, the problem is that there's so few Linux distributions that actually work like the original Linux did. So I'm not saying that's good or bad, but you'll probably have a learning curve when you come over here from some of the more modern Linux versions. So anyway, it does not use systemd. This uses RC. This uses the openrc commands to do launches. So it is a little different, but you know, they want to keep this small and very fast is the whole reason behind it. As far as let's see, let's go ahead and do this and get my Linus. I think I ran this the other day when I was playing around on the M1. Oop. I always forget the command. All right, let's try that again. That'll probably work a little better. I'm not thinking this is going to be a whole lot different than the M1 was, simply because it lays down the x86 versions of this so it lays down a very similar image on all of the platforms. So I'm not expecting this to be. It's a little bit better. I think it was 60 on the ARM, and this is 61, so it's a little bit better, but. Yeah, same errors. The Klog is not running, and also single mode isn't up. So that's identical, but it's consistent with what I had seen on the other one too. As far as its efficiency, I'm not going to go through. I should come back over here and show you how to install a desktop on here if you really want a GUI. But you know, this is really meant for setting up containers, setting up really lightweight Linux distributions, so that are acting as like an Apache server or a MySQL server. Those are all packages that are here inside of this. And so it's kind of a traditional thing. Some of the changes to this are that in the past, IF up down, which is your configuration management for networking, used to be part of busybox. They've broken that out now into its own package, so it gives you a little bit more flexibility there. Also, the PHP was on 7.4, I think, before, and now they've upgraded that to 8. So yeah, it's not. I mean, they've upgraded the kernel, obviously, and you can expect upgrades from Alpine. They think they usually come out. Then there was a long gap last year, but I think that was because of the human malware problem. But there was a long gap last year for that. So because I think there were a lot of people were just confined to home, and they were having problems trying to get people coordinated to work on it. So, but they apparently have gotten that all back together and are working on releases again. Typically, I think in most instances, it's usually between 1 and 3 months that they do releases. I think they try really hard to do once every month. So yeah, it's a good crew. They really do work on it. Do I like Alpine? Yeah, I use Alpine. Here I have I've stripped down a number of servers like the LDAP server, and I've stripped down I think it's one of the Radius servers that are running on this. It's just that it allows me to run it in a lot smaller machines that I have, like some older Pi 2s. That I have some that are running around that still are in use in the network here. So, yeah, I like it a lot. It works very well. It's very quick. It does not have if you're looking for something that has 60,000 packages, Alpine doesn't have that. But I think if I were to do, I just have the one repo. I don't have the communities mounted. So this is just the system repo. 4,689 packages are listed here. So yeah, if you're looking for the ones that are 60,000 and above, you want everything, then yeah, Alpine's not for you. But if you add there's 2 other repos you can add that will bring in a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So if that's what you want to make this into a full-blown Linux repo, you can, distro, you can certainly do that. That's all I had for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I just wanted to update what I had done before, so I didn't have to put a notice that said, oh, go here for my explanation of what Alpine is. So I thought I would update it a bit and come back in at it and look at it once again with you. There's a lot of different modes to explore with this, and there's certainly a lot of different options for installing it. I could go through those in some future video if you'd like. I know that a lot of people have asked about the USB stick, but that's really kind of trivial. I mean, it's just run the command to set up your USB. You have to add some additional files to it, along with a setup for your partitions. And that's it, really, to be able to run it. Anyway, that's all I had for today. Hope to see you again real soon. Please like and subscribe. And as always, bye for now.